pioneering civil rights activist, judge, and politician. Who will fill those shoes? Good evening. I'm Janine Wester, president of Empower Her of the Palm Beaches and organizer of When We All Vote Palm Beach County Voting Squad. Welcome to When We All Vote Palm Beach County Voting Squad Candidates Forum for the United States House of Representatives, Florida District 20, formerly held by the Honorable Alcee Hastings. The special primary election will take place on November 2nd, 2021, followed with a special general election on January the 11th, 2022, leaving this seat vacant without representation for nearly 9 months. Tonight's forum decision is a very, very, very important matter. When We All Vote is a leading national, nonpartisan initiative on a mission to change the culture around voting and to increase participation in each and every election. Created by Michelle Obama, When We All Vote brings together individuals, institutions, brands, and organizations to register new voters across the country and to advance civic education for the entire family and voters of every age to build an informed and engaged electorate for today and generations to come. Michelle Obama launched When We All Vote in 2018 and was joined by fellow co-chairs Tom Hanks, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Janai Monáe, Chris Paul, Faith Hill, Selena Gomez, Lisa Koshy, Megan Rapinoe, Shonda Rhimes, Tracy Ellis Ross, Kerry Washington, and Rita Wilson. In 2021, with dangerous legislation being passed and proposed across the country that limits the freedom to vote, to safely cast ballots and have our votes counted, Michelle Obama and Stacey Abrams will be teaming up to protect our freedom to vote. So many great organizations have joined this initiative. For instance, the Palm Beach County Voting Squad, comprised of more than 39 local nonpartisan organizations, representing the many faces of our community. We're standing by the mission to increase participation in elections and to close the voting gap of race and age. In 2020, When We All Vote ran a robust, multifaceted campaign and reached thousands of Palm Beach County citizens to educate them about the voting process. We registered them to vote and we prepared them to vote. And now, embarking upon our next step, which brings us to this platform tonight. Okay, enough of me rattling, let's move on to the excitement. Introducing our two friends and moderator for this evening is Robiana Johnson, Director of Equality and Justice Service for YWCA Palm Beach County, one of our 37 partners. Robiana.
Good evening. I have the honor of introducing the moderators. I must warn you, I truly do not have enough time to tell you how profound and accomplished they are. First, Yolanda Cass-Jackson is an experienced attorney who has established a strong reputation in the community for her leadership and commitment to civic, charitable, and professional organizations. As you can see from the slide, she is very active. Ms. Cass-Jackson is a shareholder at the Becker firm. Professionally, she concentrates her practice in governmental relations and has developed a proficiency in state government funding and appropriations. Ms. Cass-Jackson has excellent working relationships with the state's leading elected officials and policymakers. Ms. Jackson has successfully lobbied state funding for several private, historically Black colleges and universities and school boards, She has a diverse list of clients that includes Fortune 100 companies, gaming, and healthcare corporations. Throughout her career, Ms. Cass Jackson has lobbied and shepherded landmark legislation. She has recognized by multiple organizations, including the National Bar Association, University of Florida Association of Black Alumni, Gwynn Cherry Bar Association, and Florida Memorial University. She is a proud double Florida Gator and member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Lynx Incorporated. Next, we have Nicholas Johnson. Mr. Johnson hails from Kingston, Jamaica, where he attended Campion College. He furthered his studies at Boston University, the University of Florida, and State Thomas University. He is of counsel at Cohen Milstein and a member of the firm's Complex Tort Litigation Practice Group. In that role, Mr. Johnson's practice focuses on catastrophic injury and wrongful death, medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, and personal injury cases. Mr. Johnson has received accolades from many organizations. Mr. Johnson is a past president of the prestigious F. Malcolm Cunningham Senior Bar Association and the current co-chair of the Florida Bar Leadership Academy. Mr. Johnson is a community advocate and recently served on the board of directors for Scholar Career Coaching, an organization dedicated to cultivating English as a second language students. He is extremely involved as well. As you can see from his slide, Mr. Johnson also serves as a prolific writer, and his articles have been published in Florida Justice Association Journal and AAJ's Trial Magazine. Join us in welcoming Yolanda Cass Jackson and Nicholas Johnson. We are extremely honored to have them tonight as our moderators. I hope you all enjoy the forum. Take it away, Yolanda and Nick.
Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. I'm Yolanda Cass Jackson, and I want to thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to the audience for joining us for tonight's Candidates Forum. We want to thank our partners. We want to thank Allen TV, who is broadcasting this forum on Comcast, on their app, and on their website, allentv.tv. Tonight, we will hear from candidates from Florida's 20th Congressional District, spanning both Palm Beach and Broward counties. The municipalities include Belgrade, Fort Lauderdale, Miramar, Pompano Beach, Riviera Beach, West Palm Beach, and more. The seat became vacant, as we know, in April after the death of former U.S. Representative Al C. Hastings, who served in the House from 1993. The goal of this forum is to gain insight into the candidates' qualifications and platforms. Please note that all candidates were invited. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Nicholas Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Cass Jackson. Thank you, Robbie Johnson, for that introduction. Here are the rules for tonight's forum. Candidates participating this evening are broken into two groups. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening statement. We will then move on to a question and answer segment. Candidates within each group will be asked the same pre-screened questions, and they can choose not to answer. If they do answer, each answer will be limited to 1 minute. We will then ask individual questions to each candidate. Responses will be limited to 1 minute. At the conclusion of the question and answer segment, each candidate will have 90 seconds for a closing statement. We will have a timer displayed for each candidate to review. We ask that the candidates please begin when the timer starts. Please note, we will have a facilitator monitoring the audio. So candidates, please be respectful and mindful of the time restrictions to avoid being muted. Now it's time to meet the candidates.
All right, we will begin with the first group of candidates, which includes Ms. Sheila Sheflis McCormick, Mr. Elvin Downing, Mr. Amari Hardy, Mr. Dale Holness, and Ms. Barbara Sharif. Please note that all candidates were invited to this forum. We will begin with opening statements from Ms. Sheffield McCormick, followed by Mr. Downing, then Mr. Hardy, Mr. Holness, and finally Ms. Sharif. Each candidate will have 90 seconds. Please wait for the timer before you begin. So let's get to the questions. The first few questions will be asked of all candidates, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Please wait for the timer before you begin. So question 1 will be to Mr. Dowling first.
Yes.
Ms. Dowling, if you just hold on 1 second. Okay. We're going to give you a chance to do introductions and opening statements. That's what I missed, and so it took me a while. So I won't quit my day job. So, Mr. Dowling, why don't you, Ms. Sheila? I guess they have you up first and give your opening statement, and then Mr. Dowling will come back with the first question. How about that for a bounce back? All right, opening statement.
You bounce back, but I don't see, oh, there's a timer. Hi, thank you so much for having me here this evening. I'm Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. I'm excited to be here and talk about how important this election is. I am right now the CEO of Trinity Healthcare Services, which is a healthcare company. We also have a vocational school. I went to Howard University for undergraduate, University of Maryland for my master's in business administration, and St. Thomas University School of Law. Upon graduation, I served in the healthcare regulation capacity. And for the last 10 years, I've been advocating in DC, trying to move positive change in healthcare, especially when it comes to ensuring that our community has access to healthcare, our community has access to vaccinations, and making sure that we can actually thrive by having an economic initiative. Now it's time for us to move this district forward with having a strong economic and social justice platform. And that's exactly why I'm running. At this time, we see that this is the opportunity for our district to move forward strongly and boldly by having bold jobs and bold initiatives. My biggest thing that I'm trying to push forward are creating jobs and supporting small businesses. In the last year, we created over 1,200 jobs. We were able to help small businesses acquire more than $10 million in federal contracts. And this is just the beginning of the things that we're trying to do in our district. I'm running and I'm asking you to please consider me for this election so we can move forward together and ensure that we actually have economic change in our district and progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dowling.
Good evening, and thank you all very much for this opportunity. First, I want to just commend When We All Vote for the hard work that you have been doing, not just around the country, but in Palm Beach County. I am a native of Palm Beach County. I grew up on the corner of Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard and Tamarind Avenue. I'm also, I have the privilege of being life member number 8511. For the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And we've been working so hard with When We All Vote, and our Voteless People is a Hopeless People initiative. So thank you for that. I'm going to take the time that I have left to tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to be a congressman that represents real people in a real way. One of the great things that Congressman Alcee Hastings did was he served on the local level, making sure that there was a federal presence on local issues. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to leverage the time that I spent as Chief of Staff for the National Urban League. I'd like to leverage the time that I spent as Chief of Staff for the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated to make sure that there is a local presence on the issues that matter most, whether it's voting rights or homeless issues or sugarcane burning in the Glades. I would like to be there representing you. That's what Congressman Hastings taught me when I worked for him so many years ago. That's what I learned from Maud Ford Lee, a county commissioner who I had the privilege of serving so many years ago. If you give me the opportunity to serve, I will work hard for you every single day. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hardy.
Hi, thank you. My name is Omari Hardy, and I am a state representative serving District 88 in the Florida House. District 88 encompasses most of the urban and inner city communities in Palm Beach County. Many of the cities that I represent are in Congressional District 20. Now, although I live and serve in Palm Beach County, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, in Broward County. Both of my parents are teachers and are now retired teachers. And after graduating from the University of Miami and moving up to Lake Worth Beach in Palm Beach County, I followed their footsteps and entered the classroom myself, teaching civics at Roosevelt Community Middle School. And when I moved to Lake Worth Beach, I realized that we had a city that was a majority minority city. Most of the residents were Black and brown, and yet there was not a single person of color serving on the city commission then, and the city commission wasn't really listening to working class people or to the immigrant community. And so I ran and won by just 18 votes. And during the time that I served there, I was able to really give a voice to working class folks and people of color. Since then, I've had the opportunity to serve in the legislature, where I have not been afraid to get into good trouble in defense of our voting rights, in defense of good jobs, and in defense of affordable housing. And the one thing about Al C was that although he was in some respects one of a kind, he was from a generation like John Lewis and Eliza Cummings, where they weren't afraid of getting into good trouble. And so I'm running to represent this community and to be a troublemaker for justice on behalf of working families in District 20. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Holness.
Thank you for having this forum this evening. I'm Dale Holness, Broward County Commissioner for District 9. Last year, I served as the mayor of Broward County. I was first elected to office in Lauderhill in 2004. After sitting on the Realtor Association Political Action Committee, I found out that many of the elected officials didn't realize what was happening in front of them. There was drug dealers selling drugs across the street from City Hall at 19th Street and 55th. The police station was on the other corner. And I asked what were their plans to change that. Some said it wasn't unusual for that to happen in urban areas. I thought I could help and do something, so I got engaged. I got elected in 2004, started the Lauderhill Chamber of Commerce, put together a Lauderhill Education A+ plan with some people much brighter than I. Fund those at $100,000 per year. The chamber is still running, the plan is still there. Put in place in our schools, KAPOW, Kids on the Power of Work. Got the city to buy that corner where the drug dealers were, and we changed that. The good people of Broward County elected me to the county commission in 2010. And I got to work and helping our small minority and women-owned business engage in more contracting opportunities, moving it from 10.25% to 44%, which equal $136 million in 2020. Put in place an ordinance that created the Racial Equity Task Force, Police and Criminal Justice Oversight Board, the Crown Act that stop discrimination from occurring to people who wear their hair naturally, such as an afro.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to stay within those time limit, but thank you so much. Ms. Sharif.
I don't believe Ms. Sharif is here unless she has recently joined us. I don't think she's here, Ms. Cash-Jackson.
All right. Thank you very much. So let's go to the questions. Am I right? This time right. We'll go to the question. All right. I will not quit my day job. So let's on the first question, Mr. Dowling, you are going to be the first, give the first answer. And the question is, and when we get to the next person, I'm happy to repeat it. What is the biggest issue facing constituents living within Congressional District 20, and how would you remedy the issue?
Thank you for that question. I think that obviously there are a number of issues that are impacting the residents of District 20, but I would say that voting rights is perhaps chief amongst them, because a voteless people is a hopeless people. And if we don't have the franchise to be able to exercise, to even have an election, for example, and then what are we doing? And so one of the things that I will continue to do is to make sure that I am an advocate on behalf of real people, standing and fighting the good fight. And one thing about fighting the good fight is that I'm not afraid to do it. I sued Governor Ron DeSantis in federal court specifically because he would not call this election. I was the only person in this race to do so. I did so because I believe representation matters. I believe advocacy matters. If not me, then who? If not now, then when?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Holness, you're next.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
sorry. Sorry, I screwed up again.
Hello?
Listen, I screwed up again. It's Mr. Hardy that's next, and then you'll be next, Mr. Holness. I'm sorry.
No
Mr.
worries.
Hardy.
Yes, ma'am. I think the most important issue and the most pressing issue for families in this district is housing affordability. And I say that not just because I've had students in my classroom as a teacher who have confided in me that they're unhoused, but I say that because we have so many families that even if they're able to keep a roof over their head, they're spending well over a third, in some cases, well over half of their income just trying to keep that housing, trying to keep the roof over their head. And that has consequences for them. Every dollar that they're paying.
50 seconds. This is not going to
Excuse
like.
me? I'm sorry, there's someone.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
Sorry. Do you mind if I have those 10 seconds back?
Yes, you may have those. I don't know if it was
Okay.
10, but you can have it back.
Okay. Look, it's just that there are folks who are spending so much money on their housing, they don't have money to spend on their other necessities, their healthcare, their food, things for their children. And so we have to address this issue. And also, I would be remiss if I did not add that housing is a leg up into the middle class for folks. If you can't afford a home, you're not going to be able to generate wealth for yourself and for your children and your grandchildren. And so that's the most important issue, the disparity with housing and the folks, and the fact that a lot of people of color, in particular folks in this district, can't afford a place to live.
Thank you so much. Mr. Holness, now your turn.
Thank you. Economic disparity. We have in this district some of the highest unemployment rate, high poverty rate, low home ownership rate, which leads to desperate outcomes for healthcare and so many other issues. That would be the greatest issue that I believe face the people. Also, we have an issue with criminal justice that stems to lead to this disparity that also exists economically. So we've got to have to work to fix that. And that's been a major focus of what I've worked on as an elected official. We need to increase the home ownership rate. We need to lower the poverty rate. And we need to ensure that we bring resources, capital access, home ownership access to this district. And criminal justice reform certainly is something that we must work on. That's why I passed the Criminal Justice Reform and Police Oversight Board. When you look at our prisons in Florida, 17% of the population being Black, yet 49% of the people in prison are Black.
Thank you so much, Mr. Holness. And Ms. Sheffield McCormick.
Our number one issue is economic justice, especially when we talk about recovering from the pandemic. Many people in our district have lost jobs. Many people in our district have been underpaid. What we find right now is on a national level, everyone is looking to see how their district can recover. What I've been proposing are economic stimulus checks of $1,000. Right now, they're putting forth the child tax credit. That seems to be what we're leaning on, but that leaves 50% of our district out of economic recovery. That means if we have 55 and older, they will not get a check. Seniors and other single people. We need to have equitable justice when it comes towards getting economic stimulus checks, when it comes towards actually acquiring federal contracts, especially with the amount of money that's being put out from the federal government when it comes to healthcare and when it comes to the infrastructure bill. We have to ensure that minorities are being prioritized, that women are being prioritized. Small businesses are actually having the funding to accept these contracts. So it's definitely economic. This is our last moment in our generation to actually build generational wealth, and we must take it seriously.
Okay, thank you very much. The second question, first up is going to be Mr. Hardy. Now, this is a two-part question with an introduction, so bear with me. Hopefully you're a good listener, right? Our nation has witnessed attacks in many forms on Black and brown people. that have limited access to economic, educational, and social mobility. Prior to running for office, describe the work that you have done to achieve a more equitable and inclusive community. That's the first part. And second part, how will you work as an elected official to eliminate any racial injustices within our community?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, prior to becoming elected official, I was a teacher, and I chose to teach at Roosevelt Community Middle School, right on Australian, right in the heart of the Black community in Palm Beach County. And that was a choice because I wanted to teach young people who looked like me. And I wanted to be the male figure in that classroom that very often does not exist at a lot of our schools, because it is a profession where we don't have enough men teaching, right? And so, you know, my devotion to folks who look like me and who need you know, the kind of attention to help that Black folks need, that started with my profession before becoming an elected official. With respect to what I intend to do in the United States Congress, let's look at what I've done, not only in Lake Worth Beach, but also in the Florida legislature. In the Florida legislature, I proposed 2 bills, one of which was considered one of the most far-sweeping criminal justice and policing reform bills that had ever been proposed by a state legislator in the country. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of theappeal.org, which looked at the bill. In addition to that, well, I'll stop because we've only got a minute.
No, go ahead. That's a loaded question. I'll let you finish.
Well, no, look, you know, I'll just say that in Palm Beach County, no one tends to challenge the sheriff. And while elected at the local level and also while elected at the state house level, I've been pretty clear about where I stood with respect to how the sheriff treats people of color, whether that goes for Dontrell Stevens or everyday Black folk who are just being racially profiled by this sheriff, or whether it goes for folks in the jails who he refused to get vaccines for. So with respect to what I intend to do, you can look at my record. I've been strong.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Mr. Holness, do you need me to repeat the question for you, sir?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Prior to running for office, describe the work that you have done to achieve more equitable and inclusive community. Additionally, how will you work as an elected official to eliminate any racial injustices within our community?
Thank you very much. So I started a long time ago on this pathway, being a part of Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition. I was membership chair in Broward County, helping people get elected to office, such as Andrew DeGraff and Wright, working in Jesse Jackson's campaign, because he started on this a very long time ago to create equity, and he was a loud voice for us. I mentioned some of the things that I did in Lauderhill to help with that also, but I'll tell you some more. At the county, I passed the civil citation program, which basically says that if you commit a misdemeanor offense, you wouldn't be charged and you wouldn't be arrested and put in jail, because it's a waste of taxpayers' money to do that. I also worked diligently to ensure that we increase homeownership in Lauderhill and continue to do that. That's the main reason I became a real estate broker also. I was president of the South Florida Board of Realtors, the Black real estate group that put thousands of people in the house through special programs that we received from various entities. So I've been out there working for a very long time, helping to build and strengthen this community. I'll continue to do this work at the federal level, where we can push dollars into communities that have been left behind, utilizing mechanisms that are there already, such as the Opportunity Zone Act, that we now can put more money and more resources to help our small minority and women-owned business to grow and prosper, and to put educational dollars in these communities, and to set standards for criminal justice at the national level that can be pushed down to the local communities.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sherfilos McCormick, a fellow St. Thomas Law graduate. Would you like me to repeat the questions for you, ma'am?
No, I have it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So I've always taken my fight for equality to Congress. I started off fighting for the community when it came to healthcare, because I physically saw people dying because of lack of healthcare. Where we had patients who had cancer, they had money, they got into an experimental program. People in my district who got cancer, it was a death sentence. So I fought there for healthcare equality. I continued that fight when I started seeing our children being diagnosed with learning disability on these huge scales. It first started with my daughter. Then I saw how there was a direct correlation with the prison to school pipeline, that the kids who were being diagnosed in third grade with learning disabilities, at the same time, there were private prisons that were building prison cells for our kids, my daughter. And I took that to Congress also and said, if we could put more money into the schools through the healthcare bill, we could see that we could stop those children from coming in. So I've consistently fought in Congress. And in this last few months, we saw that $3 billion is going into the schools for kids with learning disabilities. It took more than 10 years for us to do that. And 200 million is coming to the state of Florida. In addition to that, I will continue my fight in Congress and in the federal government to do that. And I started that by actually creating a plan that's going to help us become equitable when it comes to finances. This is what everyone's talking about. This is the timing for it. And so I'm continuing that with a hard, solid plan that talks about taxing and spending and ensuring those funds come to our district. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dowling, the floor is yours, sir. Do you need me to read the questions again?
Would you be so kind? And how long do we have?
It's a minute, but I've been giving the candidates some more time because it's a two-part question. All right.
Yes.
So prior to running for office, describe the work that you have done to achieve a more equitable and inclusive community. And how will you work as an elected official to eliminate any racial injustices within our community?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for that question. I have spent my entire life working to advance the issues that impact real people in a real way. I had the privilege, as I mentioned before, of serving as Chief of Staff for the National Urban League, where I worked across the aisle with the Bush administration many years ago to get the American Dream Home Ownership Act passed, which gave money to African-American families to have to put down on a home, for example. I also had the opportunity to work as Chief of Staff for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, where I had the privilege of helping to build the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in between the Lincoln and Jefferson memorials on the Mall in Washington, D.C. What better place to put a king than between two presidents, right? And so I've spent my life doing just those sort of things. But when it comes to what I will do in Congress, I will do the same thing that Congressman Hastings taught me, for example, when I worked with him on Capitol Hill, or in the fights that we had with Commissioner Maud Ford Lee, where we were able in the early 1990s to pass the first minority women business enterprise ordinance for Palm Beach County that gave African Americans and women the opportunity to compete for county contracts. Or when I worked with Congressman Hastings, for example, in passing the Achievement Matters curriculum so that all Black kids and all kids in Florida could understand the history of our great culture. And so I will continue to do that if you give the opportunity for me to serve in Congress.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to pass it on to my co-moderator, Ms. Cash Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Holness, we will begin with you on this question. Last week, President Biden announced a COVID vaccination mandate that will impact roughly 100 million Americans employed in federal service and in the private sector. Do you believe the COVID vaccination should be mandatory to everyone living in the United States? Why or why not?
Yes, I certainly believe it should be mandatory. As it is now, it's mandatory to get certain vaccine to really go to school and to do so much more. I got the vaccine as a child. We don't have polio anymore. We don't have smallpox anymore. It is essential for us to stay healthy and for economy to continue to grow. So I'm in support of that, certainly. As the mayor of Broward County at the height of COVID, I was able to bring the community together to ensure that we communicated to the public how important it was for them to follow the guidelines that were set, the data that was set forth by the CDC and the policies that were set forth to ensure that we kept our families safe, our business economically stable and not close them down for too long. But we had to take those measures. We are all in this together. Every one of us must participate and be a part of the solution to this major issue that we face as a nation and as a world.
Right. All right. Ms. Sheffield McCormick, you're next.
I believe that the funding has to go hand in hand with the mandatory vaccinations. And in certain circumstances, what we saw happen with the vaccines this past session when vaccines were being distributed, we were one of the largest Black women groups vaccinated. The education for the community was not present. There was a lot of money being put out, but it did not go into the right hands of the people in the community. Thus, we found still a big misinformation campaign because that money was not used in the proper way. We cannot mandate that people take a vaccine without doing the due diligence of actually giving them the education. It must come hand in hand, but we have to make testing more available and we have to tell them the truth and then slowly transition into making it mandatory. If we proceed like this without the necessary funding and without writing in members of the community, such as our doctors, such as our churches and our leaders into telling the truth to our community, it will not happen. During the vaccination, President Joe Biden's vaccination campaign, as we were leading it, we were the first ones to usher in people in the community to come in and start teaching and knocking on doors.
I just had a follow-up question with that. You said we were the first ones to usher. Who is the we?
So my company, my Trinity Healthcare Services, we worked on President Joe Biden's minority vaccination project. And so they asked us to start vaccinated and they wanted us to bring on more than 75% that were outside the district and we refused. So we actually brought people from the community. We bussed in people from Belgrade. We brought in people from Broward so they can start coming in, hitting the ground, teaching them to talk to their communities. We were the first ones to do that.
All right. So now I'm gonna have to give everybody a little extra time because I gave you that, but I wanted to clarify that for the record. Mr. Dowling, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, ma'am. I support a vaccine mandate. I support science. I believe that we should follow the science. I support healthy communities who are safe as possible from the COVID-19 pandemic that is raging outside. And so I believe that leadership is about action. It's one thing to talk the talk, it's another thing to walk the walk. The old singer used to say, this idea about talking loud and saying nothing. And so one of the things I will commit to doing as a member of Congress is to actually put action to my words. And I did that. I was the first person in the state of Florida to sue Governor Ron DeSantis with regard to his no mask mandate impacting Palm Beach County and Broward County schools. I sued him because I believe that our children deserve an opportunity to go to safe schools where kids have to wear masks until we can get past this pandemic. That's what Alcee Hastings did when he sued to desegregate schools in Broward County. I will carry on that same level of activism if I get the privilege of serving.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you. I'm going to use my time to actually talk about the vaccines. Yes, I support mandating the vaccine for everyone here in the United States. We, of course, had to get vaccinated to go to school. Many workers, depending on your profession, may have to get additional vaccinations. For example, if you're in the military, they stick you with many vaccinations before you deploy overseas. So to me, it's a no-brainer. We should, of course, mandate it. And I really believe that by waiting as long as we have politicized the vaccine. We should never have treated this vaccine any differently than we've treated any other FDA-approved vaccines for other communicable diseases, right? So the fact that we took this long really allowed the space in the discourse to allow vaccines to become politicized. I'm glad that we're doing it. We need to do more of it because at this point, no one should have a right to endanger another person's life, right? That's what we're talking about here. Martin Luther King said, we're all woven together into a single garment of destiny. Well, that's also true with respect to public health, pandemics, and communicable diseases. So we must mandate the vaccine. We have to depoliticize this process.
Thank you. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you. For the next set of questions, we're going to ask each candidate one direct question, and each will have 1 minute to respond. Ms. Cash-Jackson.
All right. So Ms. Sharif is not here. So,
right. So I will.
Sure.
Yes. I will go on to Ms. Sherfilas McCormick.
Let me just say
you-
before we go on, Ms. Sharif will be on the second, in the second round.
Very
So,
good. Thank
okay.
you. You proposed, and you raised it in one of your earlier responses, a permanent $1,000 economic recovery check for anyone over 18 who makes less than $75,000 a year. How will you fund it?
So on our website, we have a clear description of it. And the issue of permanency is as long as we're going through the economic recovery process, that's when we want it to last. So let's make that clear. And when we started out, we looked at taxing systems that they're actually looking at right now in Congress. We believe that first, if we tax people who are leaning towards automation, everybody who went towards automation and took away jobs and now hasn't returned it, you should pay a tax. Now, this is a tax discussion that Congress has been discussing now for months. We believe if you start taxing people who are selling your private information, which has led to a lot of fraud when it comes to even you filing your taxes. We believe we should tax you there too. And when we did those two things in 1 year at 5%, we saw that we had over $600 billion. And that could cover our community. What we see going on right now is that most of the economic recovery is not proportionate. And so what that does, it leaves us out. Now, when I first mentioned this, everybody said I was crazy. A few months ago, Congress now proposing $1,200. 96 Democratic people in Congress support my idea. So it wasn't crazy, but what it was actually looking at what was going on. And it is an equitable and a solid way for us to recover.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Dowling, there's been some talk about expanding the Supreme Court. Should the Supreme Court be expanded? And if so, explain why.
Does a bear poop in the woods? The answer is yes. I believe the Supreme Court should be expanded. We're living in a time in our country where the court has been weaponized against Black folks, brown folks, women, and all kinds of minorities, and we have to do something about it. And so I do believe that the court should be expanded. I believe that the Senate ought to give the president the option to appoint as many justices as are necessary to right what is clearly a wrong ship. How that comes about, I do not know. What all the answers are, I cannot say. But I will say that I do believe that something needs to be done, and I would support that measure.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Hardy, the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida blocked enforcement of Florida's anti-riot law, as it may criminalize lawful protests while trying to prevent unlawful actions actions of rogue individuals. Is there a middle ground compromise that would preserve the spirit of the law without impeding on one's constitutional right of peaceful assembly?
Look, President Bush used to say that we don't negotiate with terrorists. I believe that we should not be compromising with Republicans on our constitutional freedoms. The interesting thing about the ruling from that district court judge was that he made clear that although it appeared to be a blatant attack on the Black Lives Matter movement, the effect of Hate Bill 1 was to basically attack our broader First Amendment freedoms as Americans. And this is what I don't understand about Republicans and about the Republican Party today. I thought that they supported the Constitution. I thought that they supported the Bill of Rights, and yet they were cutting off their noses to spite their face because they were abridging our constitutional freedom to assemble peaceably and to ask our government to address the issues that are affecting our community. They were abridging that right for everyone just to go at the Black Lives Matter movement. It was not only an unintelligent piece of legislation for them to put forward, but it was fundamentally un-American. And thankfully, that judge ruled that it was unconstitutional. So the answer is no. There's no compromise on our constitutional rights.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Holness. There's been some people would say divisiveness, which has been particularly exacerbated throughout the pandemic, and that Black politicians and professionals in South Florida have not been immune to this. What would you do to ensure unity in this community?
Well, let me say this. When you focus on moving a community forward, sometimes what you find is there's pushback. And you must do everything you can to bring people together, but you cannot compromise on the fight for the people that you represent. So yes, I've worked to bring people together. I'm the chair of the Broad Black elected officials. Many knows that I bring folks together. And in fact, Congressman, when he was alive, when we needed to bring folks together, he would help to make that call. So we've bring the Broward County Black elected officials together for years now. Under my leadership, we actually devised the Broad Black Action Plan that we're putting in effect to help get more Black people elected across Broward County. We've been very successful with that effort also, including getting many judges elected across Broward County. So I am all for unity in the community, but we must also work towards moving agenda forward for the people that we represent in as assertive manner as we possibly can. I am there for listening, for working together, and I've done that, demonstrated that clearly through my leadership at the Broad Black elected officials.
Thank you. Now I want to, before we, Nick, before I turn it back over to you, we have one more question that I'm going to ask generally, and it's one that's popped up. I watched your last debate and one that's popped up, and I just want to know your opinion on something. This is particularly talking about the resignations from your offices at this time. If you look at, if you're a member of or live in 33311, as of January, you will have no state rep, you will have no state senator, you will maybe, if you're lucky, if the swearing in happens, you'll have no member of Congress. And if the governor has not appointed a commissioner, you will have no county commissioner. The question is, what advice do you give my fictitious resident called Ms. Johnson? What advice do you give Ms. Johnson about representation after January if she's a resident of 33311? Let's start. I'll let you, whoever wants to take that first. Who wants to take that first? Mr. Hardy?
Thank you. Look, so I grew up in the 33311 in Lauderdale Manors. So I feel with Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson is my mother, is my next door neighbor, and so on and so forth. Here's the thing. There are broader systemic issues at play here. The real problem is that every working class Black person in 2 counties has been drawn into a single congressional district, right? And so what that means is that after 29 years of being honorably and faithfully served by Alcee Hastings, there are lots of qualified people who have a passion for their community, who believe that their ideas and their passion should be in Congress representing their neighbors and the people who they grew up with and who they know. So the systemic issue that we have to address is the gerrymandering that put every single Black person in 2 counties, each of which is larger than 11 states by population, into one district. And the other issue that we have to address is the fact that the legislature changed the law this year to allow the governor to appoint the successors of county commissioners who resign in order to run for office. That's an issue. So we should probably focus on the systemic stuff because what's happening right now is the democratic process. It's voters being given an opportunity to choose from among their neighbors and their friends and folks in their community who should represent them. I don't think there's a problem with that. There's a systemic issue.
Who wants to go next? Mr. Dowling, what advice would you give Ms. Johnson?
I would tell Ms. Johnson, with all due respect, to put her head between her legs and kiss her behind goodbye. Because come January, she is going to be without representation. And this is not Ms. Johnson's fault. Now, what the distinguished gentleman from the district that he represents failed to tell you is that it is because of decisions of a political nature that she is going to be in the position of not having a county commissioner, not having a state representative, not having a state senator. Ron DeSantis is now going to be in the position of determining whether or not he even wants to call an election. So let's be clear about that. We don't know whether or not he's going to call an election. If he does what he did in this election, he may not even call one. And so let's be clear about it. And so I think that once a task you have begun, you should never rest until it's done. Be the labor great or small, do it well or not at all. The problem Ms. Johnson has is that she sits in a district where we've got a not at all caucus that has decided that they want to be a member of Congress rather than serve the terms that they stood before God and at least 4 or 5 white folks and said that they would fill out, and they did not. And that is why Ms. Johnson is in the position she's in right now.
Thank you so much. Who's next?
I'll say something. I would tell Ms. Johnson the truth, that she's been abandoned. And that's the truth of it. And she's been abandoned so people can run for a different position. And we have to own up to that. And whatever reasons people chose to run, but let's please understand the implications. But as far as how she can meet her needs at that point, you would have to try and see if maybe another member of Congress or the person there who has won the election can try and advance. And if once I win the election, I would still try, even before I get there, to keep lobbying people in Congress, keep having those conversations, keep building those relationships so we can hit the ground running once we actually get into Congress. And that has to be the focus. We can't cry about the past and where people are. You know, we're called for this, and there's a lot of people who were called. But what we can do is prepare for our next path, prepare our way, have a plan, talk to Ms. Johnson now and let her know once we hit that floor running, once we get there, we're hitting the floor running, I'm fighting for you immediately. And that's what we really have to do, is prepare ourselves to go forward, have a plan, make sure we know who we're talking to, and make it happen for Ms. Johnson and everyone else in the district.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Holness, before we turn it back over to
Yes, I will say to you this, to Ms. Johnson, that I was an advocate for her before I ever even got elected to office. I will continue to be an advocate for her, regardless of what the outcome of this election is. My office has been there for this community over many, many years. I'm not going away. I'll be right here, Ms. Johnson. You can call me still even when I'm not elected. In fact, I'll give you my cell phone number now, Ms. Johnson, 954-325-4040. I've been an advocate for you before I got into political office. I'll continue to be your advocate and fight for your rights and the benefits that government can bring to you. And I'm working on the replacement.
Thank you. Nick?
All right, thank you very much. Lastly, we are going to have closing statements from this esteemed group. In your comments, please tell us why you are the best candidate and what differentiates you from your opponents. You'll have 90 seconds. We're going to begin with Ms. Sharif. Now we will begin with Ms. Sharifulus McCormick, then Mr. Dowling, then Mr. Hardy, and then Mr. Holness. I'll remind you all of the order. But Ms. Sharifulus McCormick, take it away.
Well, thank you again for having me tonight. And I tell everybody who asks me, what makes me different? I'm a fresh voice that has always been in Congress advocating, a fresh voice that's always been in Congress using the power of the pen, writing bills, amendments, commenting, talking about implementation. That has been my specialty, my focus for the last 10 years, building relationships, moving things forward. And the reason why I ran in the first time was because I had enough political courage to say, although I do respect the present congressman, I cannot allow to see my community degress and not move forward. And that's why I'm running. So the biggest thing that we have to understand is timing. What does this timing tell us? I'm the only one here who's actually built generational wealth, who have over 1,200 jobs, who's been in the trenches, not being elected, helping people get jobs, helping people actually get small businesses grow and even acquire federal contracts. It's time for us to have a fresh voice that can change the trajectory of our economic standing at the right time, and who has the fortitude to stand up to anyone and do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, we have the impassioned Mr. Dowling.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And let me just say that it would be presumptuous of me to tell you why I'm the best, because only the people can determine who is the best candidate for Congress. And so I will leave that decision to the people of the 20th Congressional District. But I will say what makes me different. I will represent you every single day at the local level, not just at the federal level. I will show up at your city council meetings, just like I've showed up at your Black Lives Matter meetings and your rallies. I will be there fighting on issues that matter to you at the local level. I have done so all of my life. I learned it from Congressman Alcee Hastings and from Commissioner Maud Ford Lee, the importance of fighting for real people. That's what I've done. When COVID-19 hit, I showed up with trucks as chairman of one of the largest food banks in this county. We provided 20 million pounds of food to 2 million starving people. I will continue to deliver for you and represent you if you give me that privilege.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hardy, floor is yours.
Thank you. First off, I wanted to thank all of you who organized this because I think this is extremely important for our community. We were represented again so very well by Alcee Hastings for 29 years, and this is the first opportunity that we've had to really choose in an open seat who is going to represent our community. So this effort is important. In the last 18 months, we've lost John Lewis, we've lost Elijah Cummings, and we've lost Alcee Hastings. These are men who overcame Jim Crow to achieve what they did, not for themselves, but for the people that they represented. And they were not afraid, as John Lewis would say, to get into good trouble. They were not afraid to go all the way on behalf of their constituents. And with respect to my record and with respect to what I've been able to accomplish for working class people and the style of advocacy that I've chosen to take, I've gone all the way for residents in Lake Worth, whether it was with community IDs for the undocumented community or the issues with their utilities, for folks in the Florida House defending our voting rights, defending affordable housing. I've gone all the way on behalf of working class and marginalized communities. And if I'm fortunate enough to be your congressman, I will go all the way and do whatever must be done to get you the best possible representation in the Congress. Thank you, and I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Mr. Holness, you have the final words before we go on our first break, sir.
I'm grateful for this forum. Let me say to you that Congressman Alcee Hastings thought I was the best person to replace him. He endorsed me prior to his passing. His son Jody has stood with me to ensure the world knows that. I'm also endorsed by over 30 elected officials, almost all of them from within District 20. Service, SEIU, Service Employee International Union, because of the work that I've done with them to ensure that workers get a living wage and also that they get full insurance benefits. Florida Immigrant Coalition, that I've worked with closely over many years to help the immigrant community, and there's a large number of immigrants within this district. Now, going forward, what we must do is ensure that we use every mechanism possible to empower the people in this district with this high poverty, high unemployment rate that we have. So Opportunity Zone exists to help this, but it doesn't have any teeth in it from the federal government. What I want to do is make sure that we're putting extra funding in place to help these communities. And also that when these opportunity zones create jobs, that a percentage of those jobs be given to the people within this community, that business in these communities be given technical support and access to capital to help capture some of those opportunities from these enterprises that are there. Also, we must sell more of our goods and our services to the rest of the world. I started Florida.
Oh, I think you went over a bit too much there, Mr. Holness. Candidates, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now we will hear from our broadcasting sponsors, Island TV.
On the evening of September 15th, Island TV invites you to watch a Congressional Candidates Forum from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Island TV's network in the States, the Caribbean, and worldwide live on Facebook. This important discussion will regroup all of the candidates seeking the seat formerly held by Congressman Hastings. Do not miss it.
Thank you, thank you. Now we have been joined by, as we can prepare for our second group, We appreciate the first group, and are we ready for our second group?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, if we're ready for our second group, we want to introduce to you Mr. Bobby DuBose, Mr. Phil Jackson. Good evening. Mr. Phil Jackson, Mr. Emmanuel Morel, Ms. Priscilla Taylor, and Mr. Perry Thurston.
Hello.
Please note that all candidates were invited to this forum, and I think we have Ms. Sharif on. Is she on?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, she did not make it for the second round. Please note that all candidates were invited to this forum, and we will begin with opening statements from Mr. DuBose, followed by Mr. Jackson, Mr. Morel, Ms. Taylor, and Mr. Thurston. Each of you will have 90 seconds to respond, and please wait for the timer before you begin. Mr. DuBose, why don't you begin?
Thank you, Ms. Jackson and Mr. Johnson, and when we all vote, Palm Beach County, the voting squad. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm State Representative Bobby DuBose. I'm currently serving as the Democratic leader in the Florida House. Prior to that, I served as a city commissioner in the city of Fort Lauderdale for approximately 6 years, where I also served as vice mayor, president of the Broward League of Cities, and also served on the Florida League of Cities exec board. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Florida, go Gators. The first person in my family to go off to college and graduate, product of 2 teenage parents. I am married to one Yvette DuBose, and we have 2/5 kids. I like to tell folks because Ethan and Jacob, but we have the pleasure of raising 3 bonus kids, my wife's sister's kids. I came in their lives when they were 1, 3, and 5. They are now 21, 22, and 25. Bree recently graduated from Florida State, and she's back home as an educator. I'm running for Congressional District 20. It's no secret we lost a political giant in Congressman Al C. Hastings. There are big shoes to fill. I am currently termed out in my capacity and serving as on the local level and the state level. I like to bring that experience and leadership and take it to DC and continue to fight and uplift the legacy that Al C. Hastings left behind.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson. You're on mute, Mr. Jackson.
I'm Dr. Phil Jackson, a retired college administrator, college vice president, dean, and professor, and a proud United States Navy veteran who served this country for 30 years. I am ready to serve again as your representative in Congress. My platform includes increasing this average Social Security benefit to $2,000 per month for senior citizens and making a $300 per child tax credit permanent, thereby lifting children and families out of poverty. We have to ensure corporations and the top 1% pay their fair share in taxes and use this money to strengthen existing programs. These are sensible measures. My platform also includes support for the Haitian and Cuban people and a path to citizenship for dreamers and our undocumented friends and neighbors. Climate change is extremely important to me. There is no greater challenge facing our nation and the world than the threat of climate change. America needs a clean energy revolution. We have to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. The United States can achieve 100% clean energy economy and a net zero emissions by 2050. As an educator, I believe young people are our greatest asset. We have to provide them with the best opportunity to secure their future. This requires offering quality public STEM education. As an educator, I also was an active member of the United Faculty of Florida at the National Education Association. I know the importance of union in securing livable wage and benefits for our families, and therefore I support the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. Help me to protect your rights. Help me to raise the minimum wage.
So, Mr. Jackson, you're out of time. Next, Mr. Emmanuel Morel.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Emmanuel G. Morel, and I'm running in the special election to replace the great Alcee Hastings. Our so-called Black leaders don't know the difference between a symbolic piece of legislation and a substantive piece of legislation. And that is why they want a party, a parade, and a plaque for supporting a symbolic holiday or a street name change. This district is one of the poorest districts in the country. We must be mad as Black folks that we have this predicament right here in two of the biggest, richest districts in the country. We ought to be talking about how to make people's pockets fatter. We ought to be talking about reparations because our people are still suffering from the legacies of slavery. We have nothing else, as far as I'm concerned, to talk about but making people's lives better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And our next, I see you, Ms. Sharif, but our next up will be Ms. Taylor.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate this evening. Again, my name is Priscilla Taylor. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a native Floridian, born and raised in Fort Pierce, Florida. Moved to Palm Beach County about 40 years ago. And after moving here, I sought to be involved, served on numerous boards and commissions, both here locally and nationally. I have owned 2 insurance agencies for 2 Fortune 500 companies. I sold those, and then I became a citizen who was working for the people. My political involvement started as a commissioner for the Port Authority. I served there for 2 terms. I went on to Florida House of Representatives, where I served for 3 terms, was appointed by Governor Christ to come back to Palm Beach County as mayor and Palm Beach County Commissioner. I was the first female and African-American to serve as mayor of Palm Beach County. And I serve the people in a way that I feel that everyone had an opportunity to benefit from the representation that I did give. Now, you might say, then why are you running? Well, I'm running because it is not okay to suppress our rights. It is not okay to take away a woman's choice. It is not okay to say that there is not climate change. There are many things that's going on within our communities that we need to be involved in. I have served the people of Palm Beach County in a number of roles, and I am ready to go forth and to serve in many more. So I ask for your support tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Thurston, you are next.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Jackson and Mr. Johnson, for hosting this event. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. You know, it's only fitting that I last in this order because my name is last on the ballot, but I read somewhere that they say the last would be first. I'm a graduate of Broward County Public School System. I'm also a graduate of an HBCU, Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. I earned the academic scholarship to the University of Miami's Law School, where I met and interned with then Federal District Judge Alcee Hastings. I would like to think that that also allowed me to get into giving back to the community and not forgetting where you came from. So when I graduated, I went to work at the Public Defender's Office, working in the courthouse every day, trying cases, which I did try over 200 cases. Now I'm married to the Dawn Thurston. I have 2 wonderful children who are out trying to change the world in their own life. I ran for office and was elected in 2006 to the Florida House of Representatives. I was the Democratic leader in the Florida House. During that time, I picked up 10 seats to increase our viability and to help set the agenda. I ran for the Senate and I was elected. And again, I was elected as leader unanimously in the Florida Senate. I served as chairman of the Florida Legislature.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thurston. We want to adhere to the time. So when your time is up, then you get cut off. I'm sorry. It's painful. I know, when I am so sorry. But
we're not the ones doing it.
We're not the one, please. We're not the ones doing it. All right. Mr. Reed, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm glad your plane made it here safe. You're next.
You. Okay, so don't cut me off.
Watch the timer. Watch the timer. You got 3 seconds at it.
Okay. I'm Broward County Commissioner Dr. Barbara Sharif. I am a doctor of nursing practice. I've been 28 years in the healthcare profession. I built a successful company that provides over 200 jobs to nurses, first frontline heroes like myself throughout Dade and Broward counties. That company has afforded me the opportunity to serve for 13 years in the year on the county, 11 years on the county commission, 2 years in the city commission. I am the first African-American female mayor in Broward County's 100-year history. Had the pleasure and privilege of being nominated twice for that. First African-American female president of the Florida Association of Counties in its 84-year history. And I served for 9 years on the National Bipartisan Health Steering Committee through National Association of Counties to fix the Affordable Care Act and decrease prescription drug costs. I have 3 girls, ages 22, 20, and 14, and they are graduating from UCF in this summer and going on to med school. I am proud to say that it has been a privilege to serve Broward County and the city of Miramar for all this time. I do not see a timer on the screen, Yolanda, so I do not know if I'm out of time or not.
You're just about out of time. 5 seconds.
5 seconds. I just want to say that I will continue to serve as the 16 County Coalition Chair, which is the same board that on 13 years on the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, now let's get to the questions. Again, the first few questions will be asked of all the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Please wait for the timer before you begin. And Mr. Jackson, you will be first. So, Mr. Jackson, how will you work to create equitable opportunities for residents in Congressional District 20? And how will you help them compete in the global economy and become economically self-sufficient? You're on mute, Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, my campaign has conducted surveys to see what the primary issues of concern are in this district. And one of them is forgiveness of college debt. And another is increasing Social Security. There are 5 of them. But those are 2 that I should focus on here. I think we can assist in terms of the issue that you just mentioned by increasing the Social Security benefit for our senior citizens to $2,000 a month, which is currently an average of $1,500. I'm sorry, $2,000 a month from $1,500 a month. And we can get these funds by taxing our corporations and the top 1%. Forgiving the debt, $50,000, at least $50,000, or even all the debt of our college graduates. We'll free them up to pursue opportunities that would bring their economic standing up. We should also provide STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math education for our children from K-12 through the first 2 years of college. This would make them competitive on the global level and also enhance their skills here at home.
All right, thank you so much. Remember, you have 1 minute. We gave you a few extra seconds there, Mr. Jackson. And Nick won't be as nice. Nick, you're up. Question number 2.
Well, it's going to be the same question for Mr. Morell.
Yes, Ms. Morell, I'm sorry, it's on you. Same question. You want me to repeat it? Okay, I'll repeat it. How will you work to create equitable opportunities for residents in Congressional District 20? And how will you help them compete in the global economy and become economically self-sufficient?
The first thing that must be done is forgiveness of student loans across the board. It must be forgiveness of student loans because that is killing poor people already. I know I've knocked on doors, people complain about this issue. They cannot get ahead. They graduate from college, yet they're not making enough money to even start to make payments on these loans. I believe it is high time that we fight for forgiveness of student loans. And I must say that I was the first one, way before Bernie Sanders, to call for forgiveness of student loans back in 2013.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Taylor, you're next. If you need me to repeat the question.
I think I understand it.
Okay.
Yes. One of the things that I feel that President Biden is actually as a part of his agenda is the free public, the college. Because I think in order for our students to compete in the global market, we need to have education, more accessible education. And if we have the free public school, that certainly will help. I feel that the regular schools need to go back to the on-the-job training and have training in apprenticeship programs so that we can have our students and ready for the employment opportunities that they have. And we also need jobs which actually pay a living wage and which pay so that people can compete, because this minimum wage truly is not enough. We need to have good paying jobs in our communities. What I like to do is use my time as a congressperson to try to entice companies to come to the area and hire local and train them for the jobs to pay good wages. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Thurston, you are next.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. I think that we should certainly get behind the Biden administration's Build Back Better program so that we can have our infrastructure needs and we can address some of the issues that are affecting our community. When we talk about having good, clean, safe water, those are infrastructure concerns where we can pull down the revenue from the federal government, invest in our communities, as well as make sure that everybody have safe water and clean, healthy water. Now, we also do need to invest in our education. Education is key to this. If we want people to be able to work and pull themselves up, we've got to make sure that they have accessibility to affordable education. And sure, I'm for forgiving the student loans, but we need to make sure that the students are prepared by investing in our schools. And that's why I've always been a big supporter of our public school system and why I have the endorsement of the Broward Teachers Union. But that's what we need to focus on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Mr. DuBose, you are next.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Ms. Cass Jackson. I'm having some problems with Wi-Fi, so you probably have seen me disappear and come back. Could you please repeat?
I will repeat the question. Yes, sir. How will you work to create equitable opportunities for residents in Congressional District 20? And how will you help them compete in the global economy and become economically self-sufficient?
I think what we need to do is create different opportunities that are going to set up the districts to gain jobs that not only will allow them to compete globally, but also to earn a livable wage. So, for example, we will, it's important for us to forgive loans and invest in higher ed and in college and so forth, but everyone's not going to necessarily attend college. For example, I passed a bill this past session that allows for training for individuals to take a course. And when they finish that course, they'll have their state license to be a state insurance adjuster. And so that's a high-paying job with the potential to come out and make 6 figures. And that's something for our young folks, which encourage, you know, the next generation, but also folks who want to go in a new industry, folks who may not have a job. And so we got to think about things like that to pair with, because everyone's not going to go to college, but there's an opportunity that also sets the stage where they can be competitive within the district and outside the district and allow them to compete globally as well. I can't see the time, I'm sorry, because I'm on the phone.
You're out of time, but thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and we have Ms. Sharif. If you want to, do you need me to repeat the questions?
No, but I got home and I'm switching computers to computer now. So I am on.
All right.
So first of all, let me just say that our national debt is growing by the minute. And if everything suggested in these forums were to come to fruition, our kids and their kids would be in debt forever. We have to figure out a way that we can bring some type of income equality to the community. And that starts by supporting a $15 an hour federally set minimum wage, also giving educational opportunities in the community to stop generational poverty and create generational wealth in our Black communities. And also to expand the coverage for the Affordable Care Act to cover those who cannot get on the plan, so that we can stop having lack of access in our Black and Brown communities and increasing our tax base by using the most critical access points of our healthcare system as primary care units. And so that's where we need to start, decrease food deserts as well, and help our senior community.
Thank you so much. All right, now, Nick, question number 2.
All right, Mr. Morel, you are up first, sir. I think I know the answer to this question based on your previous answers, but I don't want to assume. What are the top 2 priorities for your platform, and what strategies will you deploy to accomplish them?
The top 2, number 1 is poverty. That's the issue that we're dealing with in this district.
My computer.
And the second is corruption. Those are the issues. But in order for that to take place, what must happen, what needs to happen, is for America to pay back the 300 years of free labor that Black folks work, that Black folks worked for nearly 300 years and never got paid. They must be paid back. And frankly, it's in excess of $16 trillion. Until that happens, Black folks will always be behind. Our ancestors could not leave us a financial legacy because they were never paid. And that's what must happen, number 1, in this country. Thank you.
Sir, when you say that tackling corruption is one of your 2 top priorities, corruption on what level specifically?
Corruption on the part of elected leaders. The corruption on the part of elected leaders is one of the reasons that our Black communities are so dilapidated. Monies that should go to doing things are not going there. Listen, I'm a former federal investigator for 30 years. I was a member of President George H.W. Bush's Commission on Organized Crime and a member of President Obama's Commission on Human Trafficking. This place, this district, South Florida, is the armpit of the country. The corruption is rampant here.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Taylor, before I ask you what your 2 top priorities are, do you care to respond to what Mr. Morel just said?
No, I really don't. I feel that's his opinion, and God bless him.
Very well. So same question to you. What are your two top priorities for your platform, and what strategies would you deploy to accomplish them?
Okay, thank you. Taking in consideration that this district is very diverse, we do have the Glades area, which has a 41% poverty level. I have fought for that area before, but what they really need in that area and throughout District 20 really are jobs, the economy. And so what I would do is to work to try to bring more jobs, good paying jobs into the area, and also to work on the economy to get businesses to buy in, to come into the area and hire local people. We need affordable housing. Housing is really extremely expensive. However, in order to get good housing and to be able to stay in the house, you need the jobs. So the jobs, the housing goes together, and climate change I throw in because the other two go together. Climate change is essential for us here in South Florida with the hurricanes, flooding that we have here.
Certainly. Thank you. Mr. Thurston.
Thank you again. And I think that healthcare, criminal and civil justice reform, since you asked for two things, those would be my primary focus. And likewise, it has been my focus while I've served in the Florida House and the Florida Senate. You know, it's one thing to have economic viability, but if you don't have your health, you have nothing at all. And that was shown during this pandemic. You know, we had an opportunity to bring in through the Affordable Care Act $50 billion for health care, and our people wouldn't have had such drastic outcomes. Clearly, we didn't know that this pandemic was coming, but you give people preventative health care and we will be available, we will be able to withstand a lot better. And when it comes to criminal and civil justice, I've been fighting for criminal justice reform since I entered the legislature. And we see right now that there's a national plan attacking our ability to vote, and we have to do something about it.
Mr. Thurston, a follow-up question for you. When you mention healthcare as being one of your top priorities, are you suggesting to expand the Affordable Health Care Act, or what are you referring to specifically?
Two things. As it relates to Florida, we simply need to implement the Affordable Health Care Act. We've had governors and legislature that has refused to even accept all the terms of the Affordable Care Act. But certainly we need to make sure that all Americans have access to affordable health care. I think that health care is a right, not a privilege. And when I talk to people in the legislature, many of them don't even know people that don't have health care.
Thank you, sir. Mr. DeBose, your two top priorities for your platform, sir, and what strategies do you have in mind to implement them?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for the question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm now using two devices because of the Wi-Fi interruption. But quickly, my two top priorities would be healthcare and education. There's many disparities, and how I would implement them is we have an opportunity through the Build Back Better bill, reconciliation bill, to make Medicaid coverage federal, and that way we won't have to deal with the state legislature. We've shown the disparities, and it's the reason why people are dying. I mean, I'm going to funerals like every week. And so also education as well. There's an all-out attack on traditional public education. We see in Florida, they seize the moment, and again, people are losing their lives. So these two priorities need to be addressed just for the simple fact that we need to save individuals' lives. Thank you.
All right, Mr. DeBose, thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, as I stated earlier, my campaign has conducted a survey of more than 7,400 members of this district, and we find that there are 5 top issues. First being public safety, that is criminal justice reform. The second being COVID recovery. The third being forgiveness of college debt, and that's I recommended early on. Affordable health care. And the fifth being increase in Social Security. So towards that end, what I would recommend that folks go to my website, www.philjacksonforcongress.com, to see the specifics in terms of what I'm recommending in regard to each of those. But I specifically would like to see that we bypass in terms of Affordable Care Act and making sure that people get the care that they need, that we partner as a representative, your representative in Congress, I will partner with Representative Ted Dortch. He is recommending that we bypass the state legislature, which is Republican, and the governor, who is Republican, and they're blocking Medicaid going down to people in the state of Florida. We could bypass the state level and send this money directly to the local governments by writing specific lines into the budget that would allow that. The other thing, we have to push the Thrive Act. That's the Economic Recovery Act that would provide 15 million new jobs, and also implement the Green New Deal and increase minimum wage to $15 an hour. The Thrive Act is what we should be.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Looks like you have run out of time. Ms. Sharif, our fellow healthcare individual here, we've heard two fellow candidates mention healthcare as being one of their top two priorities for their platform. What would your two top priorities be, and how would you implement them?
So first of all, I said from the very beginning, healthcare was on the top of the list because it has been for a long time. One of the things that I have an expertise in is 28 years in healthcare profession dealing with insurance companies. I suggested when I was on that National Bipartisan Health Steering Committee, and I'm suggesting again, that the federal government takes the bull by the horns, create a program that allows the federal government to create a Medicaid 2, which is run by the same people that runs Medicare, and cover the lives of the people who are uncovered. The second thing would be stopping the poverty in our district by creating good paying jobs through replacing aging water infrastructure as well as aging transportation infrastructure. That means highways and roads, and getting some of that Build Back Better plan money from Congress and from President Biden. These are the things that we have to do in our community, and I'm committed to doing that.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Cash Jackson, over to you.
Yes, we will start with Ms. Taylor on this one. Constituents are frustrated because things do not seem to be getting done in Congress because things are just too partisan. What would you do to reach across the aisle, and is that possible in Congress?
Thank you for that question. I agree with them. It is very frustrating. This country has never been this divided that I can recall. But we got to work together. We are seeing where in some cases that the Republicans and the Democrats are working together, not on a lot, but on some things. We have to continue to reach across the aisle and try to come up with things that we can agree on. But right now, what I feel is that we need to get rid of the filibuster, the Democrats, and we need to work on getting Joe Biden's agenda through, because these are things that really benefit District 20 and everyone else, and actually to me in the country. But we've got to work together. That's just essential. I have done that. I mean, I was in Florida House of Representatives. I was Minority Whip and Speaker Pro Tem. And what I did was that I was able in some cases to work across the line. That is important. I would continue to do that. And I do have a proven track record in doing it, and I will continue to do that.
All right, Mr. Thurston, do you agree with that?
Well, I agree with it to a certain degree. The first thing is this: she's absolutely right. We do have to work across the aisle. I've done that my entire career. We've been in a minority position since I was elected in 2006. And I was able to go to the Senate president and get $26 million for FAMU. I was able to go and get $13 million for Bethune-Cookman and $7 million for Florida Memorial. So working across the aisles is not something that's foreign to me. When I worked with our Urban League, we made sure that we were able to get revolving loans for our community. But the other thing is this: we have to help to set the agenda. And as the Democratic leader in the House, I picked up 10 seats. When you can set the agenda and you win races, then you can advance your agenda to get things done when you can't work across the aisle. So let's elect a Val Demings and get another senator on our side so we don't have to depend on senators who don't support our agenda.
Great. So, Mr. DeBose?
Yes.
So do you agree with Mr. Thurston, or how can you do that and also make sure that the Democrats are in the majority? Any opinion on that?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. When I arrived to the Florida House in 2014, I remember the narrative was the House, we were not like DC. And this past session, we were exactly like DC. It was the worst session I ever served in. We had to unite as Democrats to fight, to do our part, to fight some of the most egregious legislation that came through. But in the midst of all that, I was still able to work across the aisle and pass key legislation that affects some of the most vulnerable in the state of Florida, and that's students with disabilities. I passed a legacy bill that's been around for 15 years. I've had it for 3 years. I passed it. It's restraint and seclusion. It affects the students who some can't speak for themselves. That was signed into law. I also passed another bill that has to do with a Rare Disease Advisory Council, which I lost my mom to, and it disproportionately affects women of color. So I'm telling you, in the most polarizing legislation session that's similar to DC, I've done it. I've worked across the aisle and passed legislation, and I have the experience and the legislation that's been codified in law to prove that. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Sharif, what would you do? Would you be able to work across the aisle?
Well, I've proven that by being the only elected official to be elected statewide as the Florida Association of Counties president to represent all 67 diverse counties in the state of Florida, Democrats and Republicans. And I represented them in Washington, D.C. on various issues, from farming and agricultural to large urban county issues. I think that you can achieve a good working relationship with others from the other party. And it's about finding things that you have in common and the dirty word of compromise. Because I think that people all too often make it sound like we as Democrats can't compromise with Republicans to get what we wanted to move the needle. It is very apparent that not all Democrats in Congress agree with a moderate approach. It's obvious that they don't agree with everything that we've proffered, but we have to find commonalities so that we can work across the aisle. And I think that is going to be that's going to be the solution that we have to come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, what would you do to work across the aisle?
Well, politics is the art of compromise. And what I found as I'm looking at the study before me here, there are more than 150 different things that Democrats and Republicans in Congress currently can't agree on. The question is, how do we go about it? For instance, there's agreement that Social Security should not be reduced, and we should make Social Security solvent. There's agreement that DACA recipients should have a path to citizenship. There's an agreement that SNAP benefits should be increased, and we should reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. There's an agreement that we should have police reform. There's agreement that we should cause the most wealthy in our country and the wealthiest corporations to pay their fair share. So there's a lot of agreement, and all we have to do is sit down, have a discussion, avoid the zero-sum game, and look for those things that we have common interest in and move them forward. My platform, if you look at my website, philjacksonforcongress.com, is based on what we can agree on and what we already have agreement on. The question is, when are we going to sit down and work through those differences that we do have?
Thank you.
And avoid the zero-sum game.
Thank you. Mr. Morrell, how are you going to reach across the aisle and how we're going to keep the Democrats in the majority at the same time?
You're
on mute. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. As a Democrat, my purpose is not to keep the Democratic Party in the majority. My purpose is to represent the people in District 20, however I can, the best way that I can. there are times when we fight for a party and we forget that we represent people. People must come first before a political party. I'm not in this game about for the party. What if the party wins, we win? No, the party can win and yet my people suffer. Now, do I put my people first or do I put the party first? I put my people first. That's where I go. That's how I view it.
So, Ms. Morrell, are you suggesting that District 20 would be better off if the Democrats were not in the majority?
No, not at all. I'm saying that I want the Democrats to be in the majority. But if I had to choose between the Democrats being in the majority and between my people in District 20, especially the poor people in the Glades, in Lauderhill, in Pompano, I would choose the people. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nick?
Thank you. For the next set of questions, we'll ask individual candidates direct questions. You will have 1 minute to respond. First question goes to Mr. Thurston. During your kickoff speech, you stated, we can fight against voter suppression. We can fight against individuals trying to chill our First Amendment rights. With the passing of Senate Bill 90, how do you plan to work in Congress to fight against voter suppression in Florida?
Thank you for that question. And I did make those statements. I made those statements because I was just coming out of a battle situation, out of one of the worst legislative sessions this state has ever seen. And that was SB 90 and HB 1 that I was referencing. The fact that we fought a good battle, but we didn't win. We didn't win because we didn't have the numbers. And that's what I led when I was in the House, increasing the numbers. Let's gain seats so that we can make things happen at the state level, because we see that there is a national plan. However, there is a solution, and that solution is in Congress. That solution is the John Lewis bill. That's going to help us with what we see happening in SB 90. And the George Floyd law will certainly help us as we fight against HB 1. So there are things there that we can work on. I'm going to join that effort, and I'm going to be the leader that I've been in the state legislature to making that happen and attacking both of those things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Thurston. Mr. DeBose.
Yes, ma'am.
On your website, you stated that we need to end the gender, race, wealth gap to ensure women of color have the same buying power as everyone else. How have you worked to support minority and women-owned businesses during your time in public service?
Being a product of a teenage mom, and one thing she emphasized to me is to trust Black women, and I've done that. Even serving now currently as the minority leader in the House, my leader pro temp is a Black woman. I talked about a piece of legislation I passed, and it's a great example of institutional racism, where in the state of Florida, if you have an insurance company and you offer a course so that someone can get a state license, if you want to have that waiver, you have to be codified in law. There's 7 businesses that are codified in law, and not one of them look like us until this past session. There is a Black female, the first and the only, who now has this waiver because I carried that legislation. And so how I've done that is my whole life, but also current day, recent legislation has passed. I trust Black women. I feel that they are the backbone. The reason why I'm where I'm at is because of the sacrifice of my mom, my grandma, and Black women. And we got to make sure that they get paid the same wages as men, because it will uplift our community and make Congressional District 20 that much stronger.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jackson, how will you work to help ensure economic development does not displace families or destroy the native culture and social fabric of existing communities within the district?
I think development is a good thing. However, it's a negative thing if you displace those communities that currently exist. So any funding or any grants, any opportunity grants, enterprise zones that are created must ensure that those folk who live in those communities have an opportunity to take first advantage of whatever is presented to them. And I think through the Thrive Act, that will happen. The Thrive Act even establishes a governing board that will ensure that the funding that goes through these communities, it's $1 trillion a year, targets Black and brown communities, target depressed communities, whether Black, brown, white, whatever. So I think supporting the Thrive Act and supporting this initiative to create more than 15 million jobs and create green jobs that will reduce greenhouse emissions, that plan would help all of our communities in terms of the fact that instead of displacing people, it will build people up. And we also need to create affordable housing opportunities by supporting the bipartisan plan to refurbish, rebuild homes in the inner city and warehouses in.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Morrell. There continues to be a need for attainable, affordable, and workforce housing throughout the Congressional District, District 20. How would you, in your capacity as a congressman, help to alleviate the challenge of lack of this type of housing?
You use whatever power, whatever means necessary to get it done. We have to push the counties, we have to push the cities to build, not to listen to developers, but to actually make a plan to help poor people. That's the only way. But unfortunately, most of our elected leaders, unfortunately, are just taking from the builders, they're taking from everybody who are against poor people. The game is rigged against poor people. So my way is to fight back for the poor, to make sure that these housing units are built. Whatever means necessary, I will do it.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Taylor, you voiced support for national standards for the police. How did you work for police reform in the prior offices that you held? And what specific standards should be included in national standards for police?
I think much of the problem that we've seen, especially since the cloak has been removed and the George Floyd Act, everything that happened with him, I know that when President Obama was in office, he actually convened a group to look at the policing and what we can do to make things better and fairer. I do feel that in order to make police reform happen, we have to have national rules so that everyone can be held accountable. If we don't have those type rules, then it could be just like what we've been seeing. In some places, you can get by with doing certain things, and other places you cannot. So that is why I said, and I continue to say, that to have standards that come from Department of Justice or from Washington, that each police department or criminal justice, that they have to abide by those rules. And it's passed by Congress, it's passed by Senate. But in order to make sure that people are held accountable for their actions, I feel that we need standards in order to do it.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sharif, climate change is happening before our eyes and is increasingly becoming urgent by the day. What actions will you take in Congress to tackle this issue?
Thank you. So I sit on the 16 County Coalition Water Resource Board right now, and that board is charged with protecting Florida's coastline as well as dealing with climate change. We see that we do not have enough reservoirs for stormwater. We do not have proper flow from the Everglades, from Lake Okeechobee, and from the Herbert Hoover Dike to produce a safe, clean drinking water as it works its way down. We see that we have too many buildups of chemicals and naturally occurring soil properties in coming down into the water. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that in Congress, we allocate enough funding for those particular products to fix the infrastructure. And I think that goes right along with Biden's Build Back Better plan. And it's something that I've always done and I'll continue to do.
Thank you very much. I would love to ask you all some more questions, but it looks like we are running short on time. So I'm going to now ask each of you to give your closing statements. In your comments, please tell us why you are the best candidate and what differentiates you from your opponents. There's a question in the chat box that says, all of you have a lot of experience. Specifically, what are your plans to help people in this district? So I know it's a loaded question to take into consideration as you give your closing statements, but please keep those topics in mind. You're going to have 90 seconds to respond, okay? So we're going to start first with Mr. DeBose, then I'll go to Mr. Jackson, Mr. Morell, Ms. Taylor, Ms. Sharif, and Mr. So, Mr. DeBose.
Thank you. Again, thank you for the opportunity for hosting this event and allowing us to come before you. If I were to point out what sets me apart, I think I'll go back to a portion of the discussion when we talked about being able to work across the aisles. We know that all of us here are here to fight for the district, and that's great. But at the end of the day, who will still be able to deliver for the district? And again, while I was in a very polarizing session that's very similar to DC, I was still able to pass 3 key pieces of legislation, the ones that affect the most vulnerable in our district and our state. Again, students with disabilities, that's a legacy bill that they're working on in DC. They've been trying to pass for many, many years, and I passed it here in the state of Florida. I'll be able to take that same experience and leadership to DC to protect our students. Also, again, the Rare Disease Advisory Council, that one's just personal to me because I lost my mom to a rare disease, scleroderma, and it's something that disproportionately affects women of color. Passed that, it's signed, codified in the law. And also I gave you an example about the institutional racism as relates to businesses and people of color and Black women. And I was a Black woman that's able to have that waiver as relates to her business. So I would tell you to take the experience that I have and think about the climate that we're in, because these issues are national and you need someone with the experience who's operated in that same climate and been able to produce. Again, I'm Representative Bobby DeBose, and I'm asking for your support and your vote this November the 2nd for Congressional District 20. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, I'm the only candidate who has national defense experience as a result of working in Europe, as well as at the Pentagon and in the Science and Defense Corridor in Maryland and DC. So in terms of international policy and understanding, I'm your candidate. I also am a strong supporter of education. As a college dean, college vice president, and professor, I understand what it takes in terms of providing the best education for our children and our college students. And I will work with Schumer and Warren in terms of forgiving college debt. They have a plan in place now. I will support them in the House on that plan. And I have built STEM programs in North Carolina, in the Science and Defense Corridor as part of the Northern Maryland Technical Council. We have built a pre-K through the first year of college program, and that's what we need United States wide. I'm your candidate, Phil Jackson for Congress, District 20.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Ms. Taylor next, and then I'll go to Mr. Morell. Ms. Taylor?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I really feel that because of my experience, I have a long and proven track record for Palm Beach County, which encompasses much of District 20. And one of the most challenging areas in District 20, I have represented firsthand with direct representation for that particular community. I was able to bring, we talk about healthcare. I was able to actually bring back money to that area for a hospital. I was able to bring money back to that area for infrastructure. I was actually even talking with the governor about starting a inland port in that particular area. So I'm keenly aware of what goes on within District 20. Not only do we talk about the economy and we need jobs, but we need gun control. We need to make sure that women have their rights, equal pay, and to have the right to make choices about their body. We still need to focus on voting. That hasn't gone through yet. But everything that we have talked about tonight, I have done. My experience for the past 20 years as an elected official in leadership positions have equipped me for what we need for District 20. I want to use my voice in Washington to represent the people of District 20. We need someone who has empathy, someone with the experience, and someone who can fight the fight to make sure that District 20 is represented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Morell.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for this privilege this evening. Once again, I think you guys have done an awesome job accommodating us. What is the purpose of government? What is the purpose of a representative? A representative is a shepherd, and a good shepherd provides for his flock. A good shepherd protects his flock. And I hear so many people here that they've been elected to this position, to that position. I am embarrassed. I have traveled around this country as a federal investigator. I tell you what, I have seen the position that our people, that Black people are in. And if you go in this district, none of us wants to get caught at 9 p.m. on Martin Luther King Boulevard anywhere. Our communities are dilapidated, and we know why. It's because there is no money. Yet we don't want to go for the jugular. I am going for the jugular. I'm asking that my people be paid the reparations that they were promised hundreds of years ago. The time has come. I am coming for the check. I am coming for the check when I get to Washington. Thank you so very much. egmorell.com.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Sharif?
Let me start by saying that I not only have a community standing behind me, I have national organizations. I've been endorsed by the 314 Action PAC, Women United for Families, Elect Democratic Women PAC, which has 8 sitting congresswomen on it, and 38 elected official endorsements locally. I am the only candidate that's been elected statewide to serve as the first and only African-American female president of the Florida Association of Counties. I have extensive knowledge on a level of advocating for the entire state of Florida on issues large and small. I have an extensive knowledge of the healthcare industry due to my 28 years in the healthcare profession. I think healthcare is going to be a very huge issue for us in this district. I am a successful business owner, and I know how to bring small business experience and reform to the SBA lending process due to the lack of access to capital for our Black and Brown communities. I can hit the ground running on day one. I am going to be an advocate for common sense gun control and gun reform laws. And I'm going to bring all of my 13 years of experience in elected office to Congress to represent the District 20 residents. And experience is what makes me different, and experience is what's going to make the difference for District 20. I'm Dr. Barbara Sharif, and I humbly ask for your vote on November the 2nd.
Thank you very much. Mr. Thurston, will you please close out the evening?
I will be delighted to do so. And I want your listeners to know that it's only fitting that I'm last, because I'll be the last name on the ballot when you get your ballot to vote for this position. I'm State Senator Perry Thurston. We've talked a lot during this time about working class people, and that's what this district is made of. So I'm extremely proud to know that the largest organization of working families have endorsed me. That's the AFL-CIO of Florida. We've also talked a lot about education. Again, I'm extremely delighted that the Broward Teachers Union has endorsed me for this position as well. Let's talk about what's important. I think it's your record, your resume, and your results. And I've talked about a lot of the things that I've accomplished for our community, but additionally, I've passed a number of bills since 2006, at least 30. And since that time, I've also chaired several caucuses, the Florida Legislative Black Caucus, the Florida House of Representatives, the Democratic senators in Tallahassee. But what's more important is the ability to get things done. You see, in this state, in every state, you can have 2 representatives in the statutory hall. Not one state has an African American. That changes this year because of my bill that makes Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune the first and only African American in the statutory hall. Thurston, perrythurston.vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And candidates, thank you for joining us this evening. Yolanda, please join me for closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. I wish to thank all of the candidates who participated this evening. Thank you to the When We All Vote Palm Beach County Voting Squad, and of course, Island TV for hosting and streaming this forum. We also want to thank you, our audience, for attending this very, very important forum this evening.
I want to remind everyone that early voting begins on October the 23rd, and the primary election is November the 2nd. If you receive your ballot by mail, they will be mailed beginning September the 18th. So that's in 3 days. Be sure to complete your ballot and return it to your county supervisor of elections office no later than November the 2nd. Good night, and remember,
when we all vote, we win.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.